Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Jolly SEO's TLDR. Today we are joined with Jack Chambers Ward, the Marketing and Partnerships Manager at Candour and the host of the Search with Candour podcast. And Jack, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Greg. I appreciate it. I was just saying before we start recording, I've been listening to your podcast for a while, enjoying a lot of the crossover of guests we've had, like Vince Nero from BuzzStream and Noah Lerner and Morley Oberstein and those guys. Like, it was very cool to see a lot of familiar faces. And that's always a good sign for me to be like, that's probably a podcast I want to work with, right? Because not to tease things too early, but we're going to be doing a crossover with Search with Candour as well, right? So it's going to be a nice little duology, a nice little pair of podcasts to go together.
No, that's my hope. And not to like plug or anything, but it was the reverse for me. I saw some guests that were familiar and I thought, oh, phew, because I was intimidated looking at your podcast. I was like, I got to level up here. I'm still on my Zoom here. I got to work on this. So really do appreciate you. Today we're not talking about the quality of my production anymore. We're going to just put that aside, and we're going to talk about what publishers can do to survive, dare I say, thrive in this era that we're moving into. It seems like zero-click search might finally be here, or we're getting close. And you've been studying this for a while.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a big topic that obviously, like you said, a lot of people are talking about at the moment. Obviously, kind of pushed forward with the advent of AI overviews, ChatGPT search, and now recently launched in 100 plus countries or whatever it was. I was going to say recently launched in the UK, but it's now expanded further than that. Is AI mode from Google being the obvious elephant in the room, I guess, in terms of zero-click searches. And I think for me, it's a big conversation. And I kind of made a bold statement, I say a hot take bold statement on Search for Candour a couple of months ago. When AI mode was announced at I.O. and people like Noah Lerner were doing the initial research and it just launched in the US. And I think I watched a webinar with, it was Joy Hawkins and Noah literally doing like live demos of AI mode. And that was the first time I'd ever seen it used in real time, right? And actually seeing query fan out in real time, all that kind of stuff. And I had this real, oh, this is the future of Google. This is the future of search. Like, I think AI mode will be the main tab, filter, whatever you want to call it, of Google, possibly by the end of this year, if not by the end of next year. Like by the end of 2026, I think we will for sure have AI mode as kind of the primary function of Google search. And I think that means, as you said, we're entering an era of zero clicks that we've probably not seen before in SEO. I've been in SEO for 7 years now, and speaking to people, like my marketing director here, Mark Williams Cook, who's been in SEO for over 20 years. It's an exciting, interesting time, but also kind of scary. And we've seen, to the publishing side of things, which is very much coming from a content creation side. I know, again, we spoke before we started recording. I was a content creator long before I was an SEO. So doing YouTube stuff, doing podcasting, stuff like that, blogging and pop culture journalism, if you want to call it that, I guess, reviewing movies and all that kind of thing back in the day. And there was a real kind of scary moment. A couple of friends of mine who have continued to do that had their websites just like absolutely crushed by the September 2023 helpful content update. I think you probably remember the apocalyptic nature some of the smaller sites have featured. And a lot of them just straight up went out of business. Sort of acquaintance friend of mine, Brandon from Retro Dodo, who runs a retro gaming website, ended up meeting with some of the guys at Google and like being quite a public face of this whole thing. And it was a big, big deal and like basically put that website, completely shifted his mindset for how to make money, how to create content on the internet, how to do it in a way that is sustainable without relying on, Google ads or display ads or all that kind of thing that I think has been the bread and butter of the publishing and news industry for the last 10, 15 years, 20 years, right?
Yeah, you mentioned helpful content update. I always like to also mention in the same breath the early 2024, like pre-Reddit IPO, the deal that was done there. Very obvious shift in traffic from the rest of the internet to Reddit, basically. So those two things, I'm so curious to hear if you can share about your friend's site, but we certainly felt that as a service provider. I know Candour is an agency as well. And at Jolly, we more or less lost the entire demographic of publishers as a client base. And, that's something we felt, but mostly it was very sad to know these awesome business owners who were providing really cool gigs for a bunch of people working in written and visual content. and then their business models were wiped, and there's nothing they felt they could do at the time. So here we are. It feels like we're on the precipice of another version of this. And if without me being too premature, jumping the gun, it feels like maybe in the next 15 minutes together, I'm going to hear a little bit about what we might hope to do with our
I hope
clients.
so. Yeah, I want to shine some light in the. I always say this on Search of the Candour. Like I do a section right at the end of the show called recommendations, where I try to bring some positivity because every bloody episode turns into existential dread and crises, and we realize like, oh no, it's the Matrix and the machines are taking over. We're all doomed, kind of stuff. Like, let's have some positive stuff to talk about at the end. Let's be nice. Let's be positive about this. And yeah, hopefully this is kind of me trying to push a little bit of the optimism through all the cynicism and the robot overlords and all that kind of stuff, right?
We won't do like box breathing techniques, everybody together right now, but just to attempt to clear the air a little bit, or maybe not.
Exactly.
I don't want to fill everyone with dread, but is the only way forward to think about other channels, or are there some publishers who are going to survive strictly on what today we consider SEO, but SEO moving forward? Or is the name of the game start figuring out other channels you can build skill in? Hey, hope you're enjoying the show. We're going to get right back to it. Real quick, if you're not sure how you're showing up in AI tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and the like, click on that first link in the description. If you fill that out for us, we'll send you your own AI visibility report and see how we can help you boost your results. All right, without further ado, remember that link and enjoy the rest of the show.
I think you have to go multi-channel, to be honest. Like to be less thriving, more surviving, I think, right? With the multi-channel approach, you're not doing the whole eggs in one basket thing. Because I think a lot of us, and again, publishing and news industry, which is what we're focusing on today, is guilty of this. Sorry to throw you all in the same boat there, but like relying on Google as the sole source, right? I mentioned those display ads. I mentioned a lot of that kind of stuff where you rely on traffic for your monetization. That I think is going to go away. And if you are solely relying on traffic and numbers, literally, clicks and the CPM of a lot of like display ads and stuff like that, you are going to be in a lot of trouble. And we have fairly significant evidence for a lot of businesses that have already felt this. And especially, the friends I grew up, writing with when I was in my early 20s and stuff, those independent businesses are going to be the ones that are going to be affected the most. These huge multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation news sites, they'll be fine. They'll find another way. They'll pivot. They'll do whatever. They have survival instincts and probably the money to do different things. For me, I'm a big proponent of independent business. I'm a big proponent of unique voices, opinions, marginalized groups getting voices heard where they haven't done before, all this kind of stuff that I think we could see a really, really significant impact on. So I think, yes, you should still do SEO. That is a big, big part of it. And I think what I know a lot of the conversation's been like, is it AEO or GEO or SEO or whatever? Like, it's all the same thing to me, man. I don't know how you feel about it, Craig, but it kind of feels the same in a lot of ways. Obviously, the measurements are changing. There's a few elements that are significantly different, like the lack of traffic being the obvious one there. But I think making good content and just being aware of different platforms, diversifying your content and not just repurposing it onto a platform, but being aware of what native content should be like on that platform. Don't just cross post the same clip across 15 different social media things. Each one, again, this is a lot of effort and a lot of time, right? But understanding what works on each platform, I think, is going to be key for building that visibility, for getting featured in things like AI search, because we've seen, you mentioned Reddit just there, Greg, being a perfect example of like, be active in communities, talk about this kind of stuff. We mentioned Noah Lerner earlier and the amazing work he's doing with the SEO community. There's even things outside of the open web and the crawlable internet, things like Slack and Discord and stuff like that. From my experience and to give you and the viewers and listeners a little bit of context, like I've been podcasting for 15 years. I've been running a reasonably successful movie podcast for the last 8 years or so. And that has been a Discord community. That's been a lot of the monetization strategies I've learned are exactly kind of what I want to build upon and scale for a lot of the people, what they're doing right now in publishing, because I think these models can work. And I think it's about adaptability. It's about flexibility. It's about diversification and not putting your eggs in one basket, because as we've learned, You don't control these platforms, right? You don't control Google. You don't control TikTok. You don't control any of this stuff. A load of creators were freaking out when TikTok was going to be banned in the US a few months ago. And they built their entire livelihood. They built their business on TikTok, shut down in an instant because, the president had a disagreement with a Chinese company or whatever it was, like tiny little things like that. And you realize like, oh, I'm out of business now because of some political issue or whatever. The tariffs that have happened in the US, we've had clients affected by that pretty heavily as well. There's all these little things you can't control. So make sure you create content you can control and be aware of the different platforms you are on so you can be flexible, be adaptable, and have that net where, okay, Google's gone, but don't worry, we're still making money on Instagram or YouTube or directly on our site or whatever it is. There are so many different ways to do it. I think you need to be aware of the diversification that's needed personally.
Okay, piggybacking on there are so many ways to do it. My question has to be, in your opinion, Jack, although you're, audio and I suppose video, very savvy at this point, for the publisher who's been all in on text, maybe done a bit of video on their site, but mostly text, a lot of publishers, especially in our area that may be listening. What's in your opinion, the starting point, the entry point for someone to start branching out? What's the channel and what's the native content that you think they can hope to transfer some of their skills and apply that? Before I let you answer it, by way of example, a lot of people are nervous to post on LinkedIn, right? Or in the past were, let's say. Now, why does that matter? Not necessarily for publishers, but for a service guy like myself. Oh, I don't want to put my whole life out there, or I'm too nervous to speak, or it's a certain type of content that does well. And over the years, that type of content changes. But at the time that I joined 10 years ago, it was really just text. And then it was layering in an image or two, a real one. But that's a pretty low bar if you think about it. That's not that hard. And sure enough, just posting on LinkedIn eventually gets us inbound. Same with Facebook groups for a period of time was working. You mentioned Slack groups. So I think there are places they can still hope to transfer these skills. Where would you say moving into 2026 at this point? We're filming in September of 2025. Where can they go?
I think a lot of it is creating, like I said, things you can control. For example, we've built a newsletter, Candour, called Core Updates. And over the last 18 months, we've hit 12,000 subscribers. Granted, that's because my boss, Mark Williams-Cook, is much more famous than me. But I do stand by the content. I stand by our original pitch and our original premise. Funnily enough, somebody else who used to do TLDR as a topic on their newsletter is Saijo George. And Saijo stopped doing that newsletter a couple of years ago now. But I love that newsletter with how succinct it was. There was no fluff. There was no extra BS stuff. It was just, here is the 10 important news stories in SEO this week. If you don't read anything else, this is the important stuff you need to know about. And that's very much Mark and I's approach to core updates. And that has driven, thousands of pounds in partnerships and sponsorships with us. That's driven interest then in sponsoring people with Search with Candour and the podcast side of things as well. Those two things cross-promote each other as well. So there's a lot of different ways you can do that. But even basic written content stuff like a newsletter, for me, when it comes to written content, it's all about building that loyalty and building that audience. And that is so much easier said than done. I am aware. I'm just saying, build a loyal audience. Ta-da, problem solved, right? That's not how that works. But for me, it's having a unique voice, having an opinion, caring about the thing you're writing about, and finding people that connect with you. Like you said, through communities, through that kind of stuff. Even if it's literally being a part of a community. There's a great quote from Ari Jabawali I saw speak at MozCon a couple of weeks ago that was, don't start by creating a community, start by joining a community. Even if you want to be a community, founder or whatever later on, you need to understand what people are talking about and how this stuff works in this industry, right? You need to understand what people are talking about.
Yeah.
Find your audience, create content that people want to subscribe to, and then you can start monetizing that. If you can build a subscriber base to a newsletter, to a podcast, to a YouTube channel, whatever it is, whatever your, like you said, your medium, whether it's written or video, you can then start thinking about, okay, out of those 12,000 subscribers to Core Updates, how many people would be interested in paying for a extra midweek update newsletter? Or how many people, for example, on my movie podcast, we do a bonus episode each week. There's an extra hour of content each week. How many out of those, 5,000 listeners will be interested in having that extra bonus content? How can I monetize the people that are really enjoying this and the people that are really loyal? And me as a listener and viewer of a content, because I consume a lot more content than I create, and I create a lot of content. I am very much that kind of person who will want to support the independent creators, who wants to give $3, $5, $10 a month, whatever it is, to say, oh, I get an extra episode of the podcast, I get an extra video, I get behind the scenes footage, all that kind of stuff. I'm interested in that. I'll send you $5 a month on Patreon or Substack or Kit or whatever it is. There are loads of different ways, I think, to build that subscriber base, and in the long run, plan to then monetize that with those evangelists, those brand advocates, those really loyal audience members as well.
Yeah, I want people to understand, at one point in time, I launched a course just shopping out some of the expertise I've developed in this one niche of earned link building over the years. And I had imposter syndrome for sure. I'm not going to say the course made me a millionaire. Didn't. At the same time, a lot of people came out of my network's woodwork to say, you've shared so much stuff in the communities over the years. I'm more than happy to pay you for this course.
100%.
It's back to what you described. Maybe they didn't actually plan to consume 100% or maybe even half, but they just felt like, oh, yeah, this is a fair way to pay that content creator back for all the stuff I have enjoyed up to date. So on the theme of communities, this isn't really getting to monetization, but before we go back into monetization, because I agree, how many people would pay for that extra newsletter, that extra video? I just wanted to, with communities, for people to understand, again, with imposter syndrome, you don't need to create it. You don't even need to be a poster. You just need to comment in someone else's post. Just stick to your lane like you do everywhere else in your life. It's not about making wild statements to attract attention. You just share what you know. And then slowly but steadily, people come to know you as someone who knows this one thing. And you may work your way up to posting, and you may work your way up to messaging the admin to say, hey, I have this cool article. I know this is your group, this is your funnel, but I'd love to share this one thing that I think your audience will love. And I'd bet that would be a great opportunity for you to get some interest in that newsletter you were just talking about, Jack, because it certainly worked for Jolly SEO. We're not at Candour size, but with about 4,000 subscribers, it's a pleasant thing every week to have people email me back and say the newsletter was awesome this week. And I haven't tried monetizing. So that's an interesting thought. But I'm not a real publisher here, guys. I'm just an agency owner. So that's okay. We did newsletter, extra newsletter. You run a podcast or a video channel, extra video. For the publishers out there who maybe have tried that or aren't sold yet, do you have another idea that they can run with for monetizing if they're not getting this traffic direct to their site right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that, like you said, the courses side of things, the digital product side of things, the books, the ebooks. I've seen people do really, really well with that. So things like I mentioned Arij Abouali just now, who wrote a fantastic book about how to build communities. So folks, if you need a place to start, it's a good place to start. But even like, I have experience. I'm a published comic book writer, not necessarily relevant here, but having experience with selling stuff on Amazon or working with publishers and editors and all that kind of stuff. You can do a course on Udemy. You can do an ebook that basically, like you said, brings together your expertise. Even if you're not already, talking about it on a podcast every single week or pushing it into your YouTube channel or whatever it is, you probably have built up experience and expertise. And whether you'd like to admit it or not, like you said, with the imposter syndrome stuff, it's difficult to get through that. You're a unique person who has unique experiences and has expertise that only you can have. And as difficult as that is for me when I'm trying to come up with new things, I always feel the pressure of, I need to do something cool. I need to do something new. My next talk or podcast needs to be revolutionary and changing the face of SEO. Like, all right, mate, calm down. Let's not get carried away. But I think it's true. It may not fundamentally shift the foundation of our industry because I talked on a podcast once, but one person or two people or three people might get inspired to try a new thing because I talked about it. That's the little changes that you want to do. And in terms of monetization, I think you can do that a lot with, hey, yeah, I know these loyal readers of mine, you've been reading my web. I've been blogging about this thing for 10 years and I'm your go-to travel recommendations person, or, budget, holiday, travel, vacation stuff, whatever it is. I've compiled all my best tips and recommendations into this ebook or physical book or whatever, which you can buy now for $20, $50, whatever you want to charge, depending on the size. There are ways to like repurpose that content into other formats that people find easier to, especially with something like a blog. Say, for example, you've been a travel blogger for 10 years. People aren't going to scroll back and find, best things to do in Las Vegas from 7 years ago necessarily. And the fact that it's that old, obviously, maybe isn't the best example. You probably should be updating your content anyway. But to have that physical thing there, or like, the thing I can reference on my phone. I know all of Greg's travel tips will be on my phone next time I'm in Vegas, so I can just have them there in my hand. Not, when was that blog post? Where did I find that? Like, have a PDF there, have a physical book if you want to go, physical book as well. And courses, I think, are another great way of doing that. Right.
Well, I'm just curious, hot take on pivoting into service as your travel example.
Absolutely.
Consulting
Yeah.
on packages or things.
That you beat me to it. That's exactly what I was about to say. I think
awesome.
The courses side of thing, I think, is one thing. And for me, like I said, I've been podcasting for 15 years at this point, and I'm very guilty of not being aware of my own accomplishments and not celebrating my own achievements, and just kind of be like, I do the job and I get on with it and whatever. Like, yeah, but if you have like tens of thousands of people that listen to your movie podcast every single month, like that puts you in the top small percentage of all the podcasts in the world, because most podcasts get hardly any engagement or drop off after 1 or 2, 3, 10 episodes, whatever it is. The fact that I've been doing this consistently for so long, I've learned from a lot of mistakes. I know how to edit, I know how to produce, I know how to market, all this kind of stuff, right? Stuff I could teach other people, stuff I could help other people out with. A friend of mine who I do collabs with a lot is Sarah McDowell from the SEO Mindset podcast. And Sarah is now a freelance podcast consultant and SEO. So doing a bit of both and combining, now running a literal studio in her hometown with her partner of like, yeah, you can come and record in our studio. I have the experience. We can do all this stuff. And you can monetize your experience. You're spot on, Greg. You can turn it into a service as well. You can become a consultant. You can become a freelancer, for want of a better phrase, to share your expertise. If I've been doing SEO for 10 years, I've been travel blogging for 15 years, I've been doing this thing and I've built up knowledge, people probably want to know about that. People starting in the industry will have things to learn from you. So you can be a useful resource for them, and they should pay you for it as well, right?
This is awesome, Jack. We try to keep it short, and I'm coming up on our time here. So the last question I love to ask in every episode of every guest is, what did I not ask about that you're wondering, like, when is he going to get to this? Why haven't we done this yet? Why is he wrapping up?
It would probably be the sponsorship side of things. I think that's the thing people ask me about the most when it comes to podcasting is, how do you talk to sponsors? How do you get sponsors? How do you build that thing? And I know I joked with you before we started recording, like marketing and partnerships manager, when Mark and I kind of created this new role for me in the company, it was like partnerships is a thing because it's all about managing our partners, our sponsors, all that kind of stuff. The companies we work with and the people that pay to advertise on the podcast and on the newsletter. So yeah, that's always a big thing. That like one of the number one question is, what microphone do I need? Let's be honest, like every podcast asked. And then the second one is like, how do I make money? How do I work with sponsors? I'm like, okay, yeah, that's always the question people ask.
Yeah, well, if you're me dragging your feet into the podcasting world, you would be like, do I really need a microphone though? That was my question. But yeah, how to monetize, Jack. Thank you so much for all your ideas today. I really appreciate your time. If people are looking for you, they should definitely check out Search with Candour, the podcast on YouTube. I'm sure across all the channels, really. Where else could people look you up?
I am Jack Chambers Ward on basically everything. My handle is JLW Chambers on pretty much everything. So you can find me LinkedIn, Blue Sky, all that kind of stuff. If you're into movies and bad movies specifically, Sequelizers is my bad movie podcast where we talk about bad movie sequels. So you can come and hear me talk for like 2.5 to 3 hours about bad films every single week as well.
That's awesome. Oh, I'm definitely going to check that out. Thank you very much. Jack, thank you for taking the time today. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to appearing on the Search with Candour pod.
Definitely, Greg. Looking forward to it. I'm sure we'll have a great conversation talking about some digital PR fun and strategies and things like that coming up on Search with Candour.
Take care, everybody. Thank you so much.